Welcome to TechTalk, which is where we sort of intersect advertising and marketing along with technology, of course. So I'm very happy to have this conversation, especially given that AI pretty much dominates all of these conversations now, and you guys are literally, I wouldn't say causing part of the problem, but definitely helping that narrative. So, first of all, as you mentioned that there's this, you're doing these reports in 30 minutes and they are like actionable insights. Could you tell me a little bit about how that journey started, how Consuma started, and how you developed this tech stack?
Perfect. First off, thanks, Tisha, for setting this up and that eloquent intro. I think it was better than I can put it myself. But and Shantanu, thanks for your time. I know we couldn't do it yesterday. I hope things are okay with your family. But yeah, so just getting back a little bit on our story itself, and as you can see, I'm probably slightly younger than what you would normally see starting a company. But
Absolutely.
nowadays, that's the norm. That's the norm, I
Right.
think. Especially if you look at the West, most of the founders there
Mhm.
start at 18. So I'm actually kind of old
Yeah.
when I look at my peers
Right.
in the West. But yeah, so I was in my college, second year of college, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, right when I started my second year, COVID hit. Right during
Yeah.
March, April, towards the end of the first year, the second semester is when COVID hit. And when
Mhm.
COVID hit, we shut down everything, right? With lockdown, with
Right.
everything that happened. So we had no classes, we had nothing to do. So I was part of this project called the COVID-19india.org. That was a
Okay.
volunteer-driven this thing. I think all of us would have used the website at some point. It was the case tracker for COVID-19 cases in India. So you could go
Okay.
track at a district level, at a state level, at this thing on day to day, which
Nice.
obviously the central government could not provide because of their own reasons. But every independent entity used to put that out, right? A BBMP would put it out in Bangalore, somebody would put it out in BMC would put it out in Bombay. So you'll have to go and collate all of this and do that. It was a very big thing. I think we got to about 8 billion hits in just a few years. And we were essentially the data providers for Niti Aayog, for IISc, IIT
Okay.
during the pandemic. Because we were the
Mhm.
only ones who had the granular level of data. And this was purely a volunteer driven org, right? It was completely volunteer led and
Right.
volunteer driven. So, in fact, we didn't make a penny off of it. We won a few grants, which we went and we gave it to NGOs. In
Mhm.
fact, one of them was a US grant of 25K USD, which went direct straight to 25 different NGOs that we found doing meaningful work. So it was purely again a lot of time at hand. How do we help during the pandemic is where we started that out. From there, actually, my entrepreneurship journey started. I think doing that gave me a good amount of context, and this was completely anonymous. In fact, a lot of people don't know each other in this group because it's all on Telegram,
Right.
and then nobody.
Right.
And we
Oh,
made it a
okay.
point not to make it about us, right? So even if you look
Right.
at, I think until very recently, I think last year when we shut it down officially, only then we made a registry of all the volunteers and said, hey, let's put out the actual names and faces
Okay. Mhm.
in case they
Right.
want to use it for professional life or for whatever.
Yeah.
But the core team, in fact, there are a couple of people I still don't know, and I worked within the trenches with them for a solid 3 months trying to get things
Right.
working here. So that was really the first part of this journey, and that's when I got turned into entrepreneurship. Because I mean, I always want to build something of my own, but this was actually doing
Mhm.
things of my own. So at that
Right.
point, I wanted to start. I started a couple of businesses, a couple of small startups, and every time I tried to build a startup, I had this Excel sheet of my ideas, and I put in the idea, I put in some ranking, some metrics that I can think of, and we've all been trained that you have to do some validation, that you have to go to the
Right.
market, find some validation for it, and my form of validation was putting out a survey. So I
Okay.
sent to a bunch of my hostel mates, a bunch of my classmates and batchmates, and say, hey, guys, please fill out this survey. And I'd wait 2 weeks, I'd wait 3 weeks, and I'd get like 20 people to reply. And out of the
Mhm.
20, I also know how many are really serious about it. What are they doing when they're filling this
Right.
survey? Most of them are cursing me that, hey, bro, this fucker's giving me some
Yeah.
survey, and I apologize for the language. But it's essentially running in that circle where I realized this market research is extremely tedious. And this was only
Right.
for me. This was only for me at a low level, nothing on the line, trying to find something to spend my time on during COVID. But when I went deeper and I said, okay, of course the bigger brands have got to have a better way. Nobody's
Mhm.
doing this.
Mhm.
But alarmingly, no. When I went and spoke to the guys at the bigger brands, the methods remain the same. The scale is the only difference, right? If I'm doing with
Right.
20, they can get to 1,000, but that's typically where they cap out. In fact, in India,
Mhm.
there's like the same panel of 100,000 people, 1 lakh people across the country representing Indians of all different denominations,
Right.
demographics, etc,
Right.
because they are the ones who fill out these surveys. So
Right.
slowly I got put onto this problem, and I started to really figure out the intricacies, and I realized that a brand today can't afford to wait. And during COVID, if you remember, Dalgona coffee was a trend, right? Dalgona
Right.
coffee came out.
Yeah.
By the time Starbucks jumped on that trend
Right.
had died.
Right. Yes.
So I
Right.
remember very clearly. My sister, she was into this dalgona trend. She used to prepare stuff at home, and then I'm like 6 months later, or 3 4 months later, whenever Starbucks launched it, I went back to her and said, "Hey, why are you not going gaga over that? Don't you want to get that?" And she was like, "That's
It's
so last year. It's over." So
right.
I think this is a major. So that's when I realized market research being slow and being time consuming, being very manual. This has been the era for the last 50 years, right?
Yeah.
At max, you've had a survey monkey come in and automate sending out surveys and collecting responses. But at the end of the day, the time lag remains, the cost lag remains, and at the
Absolutely.
end of the day, it's a survey. In fact, you take anyone in the 20s, I mean, I can openly ask, when was the last time you filled out a survey? They say, what is a survey? I mean, it's that bad in terms of in
Right.
terms of recognition. And there are certain stratas of society that you can't even ever get to fill out a survey because they're never
Yeah.
actually
Of course.
thing, right? And it could be people who don't want to trade their time for some incentive, and there are people
Yeah.
who don't even have the time to trade. So you're stuck with a place where, and obviously the fundamental methodology behind a survey is biased, right? If I ask you a question, it's going to prompt an answer in a method, no matter how well you try to ask it. It comes with
Right.
that. So this has been accepted in the industry for a long time because it was okay, right? It did not have as high repercussions as it does now. But
Right.
today there are very high. So I'll tell you one important learning we had working with these brands. So when I started out, I started talking to a lot of these brands and trying to understand, hey, what do you do at research? What do you actually do? How do you do it? And what do you get out of it? And we quickly realized that these brands don't understand what's about to hit them. And this was 4 years back. This was back in 2020,
Right.
2021. Right then, I realized these brands don't know what's about to hit them because two major shifts are happening. One is that consumers are changing faster than before, faster
Yeah.
than ever before, right? Like the amount of content consumption somebody has on their phone today, they consume more content today than a person in his 40s consumes in a year. That's the
Absolutely.
amount of data consumption. And when I'm looking at so many different influencers, micro influencers, peers, people putting up Instagram stories, you're stuck in a loop or a chamber with so many stimuli. So that changes your preferences rapidly, right?
Mhm.
I was talking to someone at some of her partner brands, and she was telling me that she looked through an ad which came on her Instagram feed, and within 3 minutes she became a customer for that brand, and she threw away the brand that she's normally existing with till today.
Oh.
Um,
Okay.
the customer brand
Right.
loyalty is not a thing anymore. There's nothing called brand
Absolutely. Yeah.
loyalty.
Yeah.
You take this. So on the consumer side, you have that shift. Trend cycles are
Mhm.
shortening, content consumption is increasing, and you're changing your mind so rapidly, quickly that you can't really keep a tab on it. If I have to do a survey on you, your mind would have changed by the end of the results of the survey, which I would get 3 months down the line. So that's
Correct.
never representative as a state of point, state or point of time. The second major shift is in competition. So, consumer brands fundamentally have enjoyed a good shelf life because the barrier to entry used to be high, right?
Right. Yeah.
It used to be like, hey, to launch a product, I need to do this level of R&D, I need to
Yeah.
have distribution, I need to have retail, I need to get someone
And
like a big
facilities, all of that. Right.
exactly. A Reliance Smart needs to go and buy me, and only
Yeah.
then and stop do it. And people had the relationships with the marts, so that
Yeah.
Lakme would get there, but a Foxtail would not get there because they
Right.
can't
Yeah.
really integrate.
Mhm.
And but today that barrier does not exist anymore. I mean, there are players, there are friends I know who drop ship from Alibaba and from Amazon, and they just add their white labeled product and they sell it out. It's
Oh,
it's
okay.
insane the amount of and they do decent business. They do a 10 CR
Ah.
business just running this. I work closely with Foxtail and then
Mhm.
Foxtail's entire skincare and cosmetics brand. They I think reached 100 crore or close to 100 CR in less than 2 years. Whereas somebody like a Lakme or Nivea at that age in 1990s, 2000s took them
Yeah.
15 years to get.
Right.
So the threat is very real. D2C brands are
Mhm.
popping up like everywhere. And at the same time, they're
Right.
not only popping up, they're competing. They're not just a small threat. They're a threat that
Yeah.
can put you out of business very soon. So these
Absolutely.
are the two major, I think, flux points for the market where you have so much overlay and so much movement that a brand now suddenly needs
Mhm.
help from research. They before research was a novelty vanity thing that hey I do it so that any big initiative I make sure my board doesn't stop me right because I have
Yeah.
Kantar or Nielsen saying hey the market exists.
Right.
But today research is intelligence and the
Mhm.
brands and the way I like to show this to a brand is that intelligence is like the operation of a CIA or an NIA for us.
Mhm.
and you are a government at war. Now, when you're at war, intelligence is what's going to win you the war. You can have
Right.
as many execution boots on ground, but if they're not with the right intelligence, you're stuck. So
Yeah.
suddenly your radars, your all your intelligence gathering systems or mechanisms become
Mhm.
critical. So
Okay.
that was where when I realized that hey, this is something that's going to hit brands back then, and it was hitting them
Mhm.
already.
Right.
That's when I realized we need to build something to solve this, and I started. I self-taught myself AI. I was a mechanical engineer by
Okay.
education. But I mean, knowledge is commoditized in what I see. A lot of that is
Yeah.
online that you need to go and retrieve. So I self-taught myself selectively whatever I needed to learn about AI, and I built out the first POCs. And that was where
Mhm.
my journey really started on how to change this. But it took us quite some time, like Tisha said, almost 3.5 years to build the technology right. Because as you would
Right.
understand, probably a research ecosystem is extremely sensitive to accuracy, whereas an AI
Mhm.
ecosystem is extremely sensitive to making mistakes. So you have
Right.
these two levels of disparities that you need to come and really coincide.
Mhm.
And obviously, technology also developed leaps and bounds. So, luckily, with frontier technology improving and our building on top of this really being at the edge of the frontier, we were able to build something meaningfully of value over the last 3 years.
Yeah. And you mentioned something very interesting about Lakme versus say a Foxtail. And a lot of these digitally native brands, they are ready to, sort of experiment and try out AI, and they realize the value of having a market report in say 30 minutes. I'm curious, what has your experience been with legacy brands? Because like a Lux is going to go to a Kantar because they have that so-called prestige. But like, are you seeing a shift in that as well? That like more these legacy brands are ready to, act to have actionable intelligence like yours?
So what I realized is so you're right completely that D2C guys typically in our experience as well early stage of the journey they would be early adopters of a tool like this. They have no
Right.
issue adopting. In fact, at Foxtail when they were setting up the entire insights division, right, they had to choose
Mhm.
between the research agency and this, and they said, hey, okay, these guys are doing some interesting work. Let's take up this tool, and that
Yeah.
was a company level decision all the way down to Ramita, who's the founder, who I know well. So
Right.
it's while that is true, what I've realized in working with these brands is, see, fundamentally, some of the legacy brands as well as D2C brands, right? They have extremely talented individuals. There's no doubt about it. I think the people working at a Britannia or a large brand like Lakme, they're extremely talented. There's no doubt about it. In fact, that's the reason they're there. They're the creme de la creme of marketers and brand managers and insights people. But the problem
Mhm.
has always been the tooling, right? You give a great person a bad tool, you put a limit, an artificial limit on what they can do. And
Right.
the problem is not that they've not asked for better tools, it's that they've not been able to imagine a better tool that can help them there.
Right.
There have been
Mhm.
obviously listening tools that have been adopted left, right, center, and there are some companies that do extremely good work with listening, despite how
Mhm.
basic the output is. They add their
Right.
layer, they do a lot of effort to work with social listening to make it seem good. In fact, there
Mhm.
are agencies like Mindshare that who are our partners in our projects who do a lot of interesting work on top of existing listening tools, right?
Mhm.
But obviously that limits a lot of what you can imagine and what you can do. And
Right.
that's where I realized, right? So when I do work with a legacy brand today, once they start to understand what the tool can do,
Right.
they actually leverage it almost the same way a D2C brand does. But now they
Okay.
also have the advantage of executing on it at a large scale. So that's
Right.
where I think for a larger brand, this becomes a very, very big market mover. Because
Mhm.
not only do you have the ability to go and now actually think, see, fundamentally, what's the difference between a D2C and a large brand is apart from the bureaucracy and larger org structure and getting things
Right.
agile, fundamentally the difference is the founder led at D2C stage, at the early stage of D2C, the founder has the insight on the market. He or
Okay.
she has intelligence on the market, which is why they're driving the business, right? So a Foxtail,
Mhm.
Romita knows exactly what would sell in her home market of what she wanted to start. So she starts that, and her insight is what leads the team. So they don't need intelligence per se in the early stage. But as a brand, you're already beyond this stage. So now the founder and a few individuals' talent and knowledge is not enough, right? Their
Right.
insight on the market is not enough. They need tools to be always on, to always understand the market. So that's the gap that we're bridging. I think the only difference then remains, are you agile enough to execute on these ideas, or are you going to be
Right.
stubborn as a brand? And that comes
Mhm.
top down, right? That comes in from the management and not from
Right.
even the CMO sometimes doesn't have control over that. That's a board level decision to make.
Yeah. And you mentioned something that like the Dalgona coffee trend, and you do need to immediately action something if it starts trending like this. So Ganji Churail thing or whatever. And I'm just curious because how are you this moment's marketing is having its moment, so to speak. And is that something you are seeing with your clients as well, that they want to tap into this virality immediately, which is why they're using consumer?
100%. So there is obviously the trend spotting angle to it, which is a big use case of our tool, apart from the
Mm.
consumer research part, where they realize that the cadence that I do trend spotting in does not need to be
Mm.
months. It can be weeks.
Right.
In fact, we have brands that work with us on a daily basis on trend spotting. And
Yeah.
let me tell you a good example. And then we can't take credit for this because it's not from our tool, but something which really was one good, I think, bright application of moment marketing was Britannia with the entire Prashant and Prasant
Right.
trend, which came up. I think Britannia was the one company or one brand that moved on it so quick that they
Hmm.
were able to do it before it becomes lame, right? I think
Right.
in Gen Z colloquialism, I think you look at a lot of these memes which come out that hey, once a brand says something, that stops being,
It's
that's the
dead.
end of the trend.
Yeah.
But Britannia was so agile in that movement, and I work closely with the Mindshare team that helps them out. And
Okay.
I heard from them that hey, how quickly were they able to jump on this trend was very quick. They jumped. In
Hmm.
fact, the moment they noticed the trend in
Yeah.
messaging and in the social context, their internal teams took it up so quickly, and they were able to. I think they revised the packaging. They launched a media campaign. They changed
Yeah.
their entire labels or usernames
Hmm.
and account tags across the board.
Yeah.
That's a lot of commitment on the trend. But that is what a brand can do with the right intelligence if they have the willingness or conviction. And Britannia did it. So I was actually very happy to see that because a brand that large being able to be that agile is obviously a positive thing
Absolutely.
for people.
Right. And of course, technology sort of destroys the geographical line, so to speak, because it sort
Yeah.
of seeps into everything. So I'm curious if you tell me, more about consumers' clients, because I believe you sort of work with a lot of partners across the world. So if you could sort of elaborate on that.
So we started with the home market of India because this is where we
Mhm.
spent 4.5
Right.
years now of understanding. And then most of our client base is top brands of India today. We work
Mhm.
in one form or the other with a lot of household names from PepsiCo, Coca-Cola to Britannia and others. So we do a lot of work with these brands either directly or via agencies. So we work with
Mhm.
WPP, who are probably the world's largest marketing agency or media
Mhm.
firm. We work closely with their sister agencies like your Group M's and Mindshares.
Ah.
That's a relationship we've been building for almost 2 years, right? In fact,
Mhm.
they've seen us at different stages of pilots. They've actually also guided us in our product development journey because we see the feedback from them. And these are the guys who are making the decisions for the largest brands, or at least making the
Okay.
presentations to the largest plans.
Right.
So that's where our journey started, and a lot of
Mhm.
our traction is there. The second interesting market to us is the US, of course, which is
Right.
going to become our primary market soon.
Oh, okay.
US, we already have a few US investors on board, and we're
Ah.
actively raising right now also from people from the
Mhm.
US. So US is an interesting market because the willingness to pay is extremely high. Obviously, the ecosystem
Absolutely.
of the
Yeah.
market itself is so rich, and in our limited efforts there, we've gotten really good traction. Right,
Okay.
I spent like a month last year in the US, just touring around and doing a few demos, and there the pilot price is probably larger than some of the monthly client licenses that they take here. So
Right.
it's definitely that's true for almost any category with
Mhm.
market
Yeah.
appreciation. But the beauty is that that's the one market where they care about time a lot more than anyone else, a lot
Right.
about removing man hours. So there's a client there that we're automating almost 1 million man hours a year that they have 200 analysts to sit and do. And we're doing
Wow.
something that used to take them 1 entire year and 200 people every month in 30 minutes to 45 minutes.
Wow.
So it's massive for them because they're also the global HQs. A lot of times they are the global HQs for these brands. So an
Yeah.
India brand goes and talks to that global HQ that you adopted this tool, and then the global HQ says, "Hey, that's actually going to be massive because I can not only do it in my ecosystem, I can do it across all my regional HQs as well."
All my different
So
markets.
that Exactly. So US is another very interesting market which we will get to, and then today we're actually raising the round partly to go and get that US traction because it requires a little bit of effort and investment to make it happen. The third market for us, which is interesting, is Middle East,
Okay.
especially Dubai,
Mhm.
Dubai and the Gulf region. So I'll tell you why, and this is an interesting learning for me. A lot of the expats come into Dubai from UK, India, US, and they're asked by brands to drive projects in the local economy. But obviously,
Right.
they have limited context on the local culture, the local market and what's happening on ground. Not only sometimes they don't even know what's happening at the Asia level.
Right.
Forget Middle East. But
Yeah.
these guys are extremely smart, extremely talented expats that they bring in from different countries. So while that's the culture, these expats have been trained and obviously have the budgets to go and pull in research to aid them in their understanding of the market.
Right.
So their research spends in Dubai are actually high, and we have a lot of interest from people who want to white label our solution there, take it to market there. There are like a lot of, because Dubai again is a strange market. The usual players may not have as much of a market share there than they have
Right.
elsewhere. So Nielsen
Mhm.
Kantar's market share in Dubai may actually be slightly lower than their market share in the rest of the countries. Reason being that a lot of the agencies preferred internally to Dubai are boutique agencies or are agencies that are run by locals who have
Right.
the local context. So
Mhm.
there's an amount of I think clinginess to that, which means the route to market becomes slightly different to win
Oh,
that market. So we're trying to partner with a few firms that already who have crazy interest, and we should be launching in that market very soon. I'm actually going there to spend some time in Dubai once we clear out, because right now is probably the busiest time we've had
yeah.
all through our existence.
Right. And you mentioned your partners, and I believe you also partnered with Ruchira Jain of Elevate Insights. If you could tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about that, because I believe that's relatively new development.
Yeah, so Ruchira was someone that I know closely for more than a year now. She used to be the VP of Insights at PepsiCo, Swiggy, and then started her own insights firm. So she's one of the I think domain experts when it comes to insights. And in fact, she works with some of the top clients across the globe, not only at the India level but at the Asia level.
Mhm.
So she's seen the product grow and she's seen a lot of the development, and our conversations have always been on what will be the future of insights, right?
Okay.
Because I come in from a technology background that I understand what technology can build, and of course she understands the market really well and what brands want. So we started really chatting about this last year, and we always wanted to get something signed and then taken to market. But it took us
Mhm.
some time to really figure out the fitment, right? We want to make sure that what we deliver is
Yeah.
truly, because we don't believe in, I fundamentally, and she would agree, we don't believe in incremental change. Incremental change is something that is, I might be naive to say it, but it's boring to me. What we need to do needs to be a fundamental shift, right? There needs to
Okay.
be something that is orders of magnitude better. Otherwise, it's not worth taking to a brand, because the friction involved or the inertia involved to move away from
Right.
existing solutions is. So with Ruchira and her team, and she has a lovely team at Elevate, we finally figured out a way to model it, where we build an insights model of the future.
Mhm.
Because the thesis is technology will take over majority of the research and intelligence work across the board. The one place I think where you may have some, I mean, which will still always exist, is the client-facing element to it. What I mean by that is, if you take consulting,
Mhm.
you can never remove the partner presenting in the presentation. You can never remove that individual,
Right.
because in fact a lot of the dollars in consulting are spent for the partner and not for the analysis of the partner, right? It's
Right.
for their
Yeah.
their authority
For
to
the
tell you
person. Yeah.
something.
Right.
So what we will be replacing is a lot of the analysts and associates, and bottom up till the ladder, and give the
Mhm.
partner a bunch of different ideas or insights or directionals that they can go and execute. So the same, but the partner's discretion is what you need to think
Mhm.
about which of these are relevant the most, or which of these have I historically seen, or what is my intuition saying for this brand, given the
Right.
myriad of contexts. And some of these contexts are very internal contexts that are never shared, right? It could be a budgetary constraint. It could be that a personal preference of the board member is XYZ, and now you need to now align stakeholders as well. So the
Right.
partner's job, or someone who's going and presenting this or consulting it, the job is actually well beyond just providing the most optimized or efficient solution. It's about
Mhm.
navigating all these different things, including domain, including capability, including the unstated biases or unstated disadvantages a brand has that you can't ever put into a tool as a context. So that is where, when we looked at Elevate, we saw a model where we can do a mixed model approach, which is combine an insights or technology-led insights along with humans who are extremely talented researchers, along with some
Mhm.
level of primary research, who still do some level of primary work, which could be focus groups and very focused interviews, but
Right.
extremely high quality and extremely narrowed down. Because and once these inputs come in from these focus groups and ground research work, the entire analysis happens through us. Entire analysis happens through the technology. In fact, even before you start the interviews, the technology
Mhm.
does its own read of the market to understand that, hey, you don't need to ask them these 20 questions. These are the two different differential insights we've gotten from the system. Go validate that with your market, and that also gives that feedback loop and confidence to the.
But I'm curious, like, because you're getting all these insights and you're sort of you're getting all these data points and you're sort of making insights out of them. So, could you tell us a little bit about where you source these data points from? Because, as you said, a lot of people don't want to fill up surveys anymore.
So what we do is we see the fundamental hypothesis is that anything that people are saying today to you, or any question
Hmm.
that you have in your mind, majority of your questions are already answered organically on the web. And this includes
Right.
social media, includes reels, shorts, videos, blogs, articles, media, especially media. When you do, let's say you're doing an article, now you have data on what I have said about a topic. You take your
Right.
LinkedIn, so you have organic consumer information on the web, publicly available.
Hmm.
The problem is that it's looking for a needle in a haystack, and you don't even know what the needle looks like, right? You
Right.
don't even,
Yeah.
it's not even a needle in a haystack problem. It's like you're trying to find a very specific key in a haystack, but you need to
Hmm.
keep putting every key into the lock and making sure the keys that you're finding are actually fitting in. So
Right.
it's about perspective and context in addition to finding. It's not just a brute force approach where I
Hmm.
look through the haystack, I get a magnet, and I get the needle. It's about getting the right needle, getting the right context, and this is where a lot of power goes into it, and a lot of power gets unlocked.
Hmm.
A lot of words like mining are usually used when we look at this term. It's like data mining or insights
Yeah.
mining, and
Yeah.
interestingly, it is like that. In fact, it's more complex than that because you're not just trying to find any gold; you're trying to find the right gold, and you're not
Right.
even sure if it's gold. You need to understand that at scale to understand if it's gold. So,
Hmm.
it's a very interesting space. I think in our understanding, in our work over the last 2 years at least of active research, we found incredible insights available in public data that you would never imagine would be otherwise possible, right? There were
Okay.
levels of insights. Like we were able to tell a big brand that consumers who like deeper blends of coffee also like reading romantic novels, and that is something you can't even get through a survey.
Yeah. Mm.
So,
Right.
and this is at
Yeah.
an aggregate level, so it's like 60,
Mhm.
70, 72% of users. There's a huge overlap, and you get this by understanding their online behaviors along with this. And I think fundamentally, what we see this business to be is not just the business. We have the potential to become the single most important entity for any consumer brand or any consumer facing
Mhm.
entity. And the reason being that in any market, the ones with intelligence are the ones that win, right?
Right.
And our business is going to be mining intelligence long before others figure out how to mine it. And that
You have
means
the tech stack in
every
place.
query
Yeah.
happening at consumer builds up our
Mhm.
intelligence stack at levels that become a crazy edge for us. And we will get to the stage at some point where I think, and this is going to sound crazy right now to you, but it may not be in a few years. We get to the point where we're almost like a chip in someone's brain, right? It's like, I know what you're thinking, I know what you're behaving, I know what you're modeling, even before you say it to me. And there's this myriad society that we create, and it's not I'm not going to go into philosophical part whether it's good or bad, but it becomes a society where a brand can understand you better than you even can yourself, and they
Mhm.
can model and run so many little simulations in their compute, and they will understand that okay, Shantanu is going to respond this way if I launch XYZ, and that
Yeah.
means both good and bad. The good, of course, is Shantanu gets a much better product than he ever
Right.
could ask for, and customized marketing, messaging, and advertising, which makes you obviously having an enjoyment as a consumer. But at the same time, you have the alternate side of the spectrum, which is that I feel invaded now that they know so much more about me. So
Yeah.
there's obviously a line between that, and we'll get to that at some stage. But I think
Mhm.
as a company, we have the potential to have this intelligence, which is
Mhm.
going to be differential, which is actual gold mining. And I'm not saying it in the colloquial sense of the word, but the actual sense of the word. Because
Right.
data is gold was what people used to say. I don't think data is gold. Intelligence is gold. And converting this data to
Right.
intelligence is not easy. So we're that refined diamond, and we're not just
Yeah.
taking the rocks out of the mouth. So
Yeah.
that's where I think a lot of this will
Yeah.
divert soon.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't find that crazy at all. I mean, I think my favorite algorithm is YouTube's, and the way they sort of figure out the content you want is, it is kind of scary at times because you're like, man, like they should know what a huge nerd I am. Like it's a bit weird. So yeah. So thank you so much for this. Again, LinkedIn, and I shall see you there. Thank you so much, Tisha.
Shantanu, thanks for your time.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Thank
Great
you.
chatting.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Thanks,
All
Shantanu.
right.
Tisha.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for that.
it.